Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rival Recon here on Anfield Index Pro. I'm Harry Sethi. The top of the table Reds secured another trip to Wembley this season with a 4-0 humbling of Tottenham Hotspur last week at Anfield. Unfortunately, a much-changed side with a number of peripheral senior players in it failed to produce the quality needed to beat the bottom side in the Championship a few days later, a side who boast a goal difference of -34, with the Reds exiting the FA Cup early, courtesy of Plymouth. Despite this disappointment, the rest that key first teamers enjoyed as a result will no doubt benefit the side moving forward, and fewer games to contend with in the coming weeks will make attacking the league and Champions League a more manageable feat. Turning our attention back to the league this week, we focus in on the rescheduled Merseyside derby and the last one at Goodison Park this Wednesday evening. And joining me to talk through whether this is a new era for Everton, whether Sean Dyche deserves more credit than he's gotten for the job he did prior to his sacking, and how far the returning prodigal son David Moyes can take this blue side, I'm delighted to welcome back Mike Goodman from CBS Sports and the Double Pivot podcast. Welcome back, Mike. Good to speak with you.
I am happy to be here. I am happy that Everton remains in the Premier League so we can keep doing it.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember probably the last time that we had this conversation, but I think you just mentioned there before we started recording things to talk about because I mean it's always felt eventful. We've had discussions around Everton, but a lot of it was things that weren't happening or things that were maybe about to happen, or certainly with the ownership and things like that, and on the pitch issues continue to frustrate. But I think it's an interesting time to get your opinion on where Everton are, given some of the resurgence following sort of David Moyes' return, the return of Moyes. But before we get on to that, it is tempting to jump to that. But I wanted to ask you, at the start of the season, when Sean Dyche was still on the helm, before a ball had been kicked, what really were your expectations for the season, given what had come before it in terms of sort of last season's 15th place finish? Some of the struggles in terms of sort of what the club were or were not allowed to do from a financial perspective, some of the penalties, still that lingering spectre of the takeover that hadn't been completed at that stage. What were your expectations for this season?
Sure, yeah. The thing that's interesting about Everton, and has been for the last few years, is how much of the story is not on the pitch, right? I think there has been, certainly prior to the takeover, so if we're thinking about where we were at the beginning of the season, at the end of last season, the last few seasons, so much of what has been weighing on Everton has really been, like an existential risk to this club, right? That the financial situation was so bad, the ownership situation was so bad, that staring sort of relegation in the face might have just ended the club's existence. They really legitimately may just have ceased to exist if they got relegated. And then at the end of that, you see, okay, maybe there's new ownership comes in, the new stadium is waiting on the horizon, and there's just sort of this feeling that if the club can white knuckle through couple of seasons and not get relegated, maybe you can come out the other side of it. And so to that end, when they hired Sean Dyche coming into this season, my thought was always, look, just don't get relegated. Do that, things can maybe get better on the other side of it. And so I think really only slightly jokingly, I said, if Sean Dyche can make Everton just sort of normal bad, right? Just sort of normal, not very good, not threatening anything, but not getting relegated, that's enough for this year. And so that is very much the mentality I came into this season feeling. And I think we can get into going from Dyche to Moyes, we can get into the new ownership group, but I think for the remainder of this year, that's sort of where you are, which is okay, probably not going to get relegated, so that's fine. But the work of building something cohesive doesn't really start until the summer.
Yeah, and I think what I am interested in speaking to you about is around, I think it's quite easy considering, of course, Moyes' previous time at the club, how that went, sort of how he was viewed, and then the impact he's managed to have since returning, in terms of the results and the performances and just the feeling, the vibes of the matter, I guess. It'd be easy to go, actually be quite damning of Sean Dyche and his time as manager. I remember around the time of the sacking, because I think it took place, what was it, in January 9th, Sean Dyche was sacked, and then David Moyes was appointed literally a couple of days later. So it sort of strikes you that it was long in the planning. Dyche ends up lasting less than 2 years as manager of Everton. But as you mentioned, when he came in, his remit was, make them normal bad, like don't get relegated. Of course, actually looking at the end of last season as well, 4 wins out of the last 6 to sort of help secure that safety. And then this season, I look at the results and you see sort of obviously a huge handful of draws, making Everton tough to beat, but whilst also, I'm sure, playing far less than thrilling football at times. But I wanted to get your view on Dyche's time as manager, because as you kind of mentioned there, his remit was pretty simple. His resources were what they were. The situation was what it was when he arrived and had to do his work. And I think it's interesting to see sort of like by the time he leaves, the narrative's kind of written, especially with how Moyes has done since he's initially come in. But what's your view on how Dyche did with the job that he was given?
Yeah, look, I think everybody at the end, when you don't win games and you don't score goals, people feel bad. It feels bad. It feels bad to watch it every week. And the mitigating factors, they're playing teams at the top of the table. There are a lot of other teams that are worse than them. They're probably not going to get relegated anyway. Those are all true, but it just feels bad, right, watching these games. But I think if you look at the Sean Dyche tenure at Everton on the whole, it is an unmitigated success. I think that Sean Dyche is not going to be appreciated historically for how important he was in the survival of this club. That's really my belief. I think that until the Freaking Group buys Everton for those 2.5 years, and then the years before that, as things got increasingly worse and worse and worse, the situation at this club, I think, was worse than a lot of fans really wanted to look in the face. That this was a really, really perilous situation for the club. And Sean Dyche comes in when the team is threatened and they survive. And then the next season, they are docked points with a team that is not very good. And they survive without really, even flirting that much with a serious relegation tug. And honestly, I think this season, had he not left, and we can talk about the circumstances surrounding it, whose fault it was, why it happened, all this stuff. But had he not left, he leaves at a time when Everton had just finished a brutal stretch of the schedule, right? I mean, like an absolutely brutal stretch of schedule. And Moyes comes in at a time with a much easier stretch of schedule, and what you would expect to happen happens. Now, look, I think Moyes has clearly got lots of cachet at the club. He's got lots of history with the club. He's playing somewhat more, I don't want to say front-footed, but is more willing to try to score goals than Sean Dyche was, for sure. And so that all feels good. But I think that really Sean Dyche was incredibly important for Everton during a brutal period. Now, that doesn't mean he necessarily would have been the right guy to take this club forward as you have more resources, as you need to start to look to do other things than just survive. But I think that for Dyche's time at the club, it was an absolute unmitigated success. And I hope that as time goes by and the immediacy of feeling bad at not scoring goals, which is a very real thing, fades, fans will be able to see that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, because I think you're right that I could easily see him being that sort of forgotten man in this story, depending on how things go from here on out. But you're right to mention the fixtures. You can see, yes, of course, lots of draws. But when you look at who the draws are against, and particularly that little run, Arsenal, Chelsea, City, 3 back-to-back draws. Obviously, then losing to one of the greatest sides in Europe, Nottingham Forest, at that time. But lots of admirable performances in there, I think, in terms of actually the results that the club ended up getting. In terms of the decision to go for Moyes and the timing of that decision as well. So, of course, the Friedkin Group come in and the ownership is completed. The takeover is completed on the 19th of December. Moyes is in like barely a few weeks later. To me, that feels partly vibes in terms of sort of the ownership wanting to come in and restore a good feeling. And as you mentioned there, it does feel nice, of course, to score goals and to, long stretches where you're not winning those games can have a negative impact on sort of fan sentiment and things like that. There's two questions here because first of all, the ownership situation has been rattling on for so long that I feel like I should ask you, what do you make of the fact that Friedkin Group have completed their takeover of Everton and everything that's involved with that? It's probably a longer conversation that we have time for, but definitely your summary on that side of things, and then also the timing of Moyes' appointment and that sacking.
Yeah, so sure. The first thing about the Friedkin Group is for the club, it's just such a relief to have owners that aren't broke, owners that have real money, owners that are not any. I think there are going to be a lot of questions as the years go by about the Friedkin Group's ability to run a team well. I think I'll get into that in a second when I talk about Moyes and hiring him and all this stuff. But not risking going bankrupt, going into a new stadium, getting over the hump of, the Moshiri ownership years, it's just such a relief. It is just such a relief to know that, like, this team now is not going anywhere. It's not going to cease to exist. They're not going to be in administration. Like, it's a huge, huge deal. And when you look at the owners that were sort of linked to maybe come in before the Friedkin Group gets involved, they were not owners who were going to remove that risk in any real way. They were owners that were going to also, like, not necessarily, and maybe they would have moved Everton back from the brink a bit, but like 777 Group, which now like doesn't really exist because of legal problems, were like not a particular step up. They were like a buyer of last resort. And the Friedkin Group, for all that you might criticize how they run a team, and if you talk to Roma fans, right, that's the other team that the Friedkins own, they have a lot to say. They have money, and Everton are not going anywhere. And that is, it's just like first, second, and third things about the ownership is it is a huge relief. So that's it.
Alright, the Reds, it's Jack here, and that was a clip from one of Anfield Index's audio podcasts. If you have enjoyed the video, make sure you do like, share, and subscribe to keep up to date on all things LFC. We record around 100 audio podcasts every month, with our shows featuring match-going fans, top journalists, professional analysts, and even Liverpool legends along the way, with the Great Dane himself, Jan Molby, joining us every single week. If you want to listen to all our podcasts for free, head over to anfieldindex.com/podcasts. Our audio shows are available wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Anfield Index. Or if you prefer to listen to all our podcasts in full and without any ads, why not head over to AI Pro today to check it out now at anfieldindexpro.com. If you want to get involved in the great growing community of Liverpool fans, check out the Anfield Index Discord. The link is in the description. Do get involved with that, from Reds around every corner of the globe. For now, Reds, hope you enjoyed this video.